you two must have been coming up to 16,
17,
to an age when it could have been beginning to get difficult. There were German soldiers there. There were not a lot of boys your age around.
I think I only thought about food.
We had 9 days without bread. And I'm not a religious person, but I can remember in assembly saying the words, give us this day our daily bread, and we didn't have any.
The sun has got his hat on, hip 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 hooray! The sun has got his hat on and he's coming out to...
Putting a brave face on things, Ian's mother and her teenage friends managed to do more than just get by. Their favourite hangout gave them a chance to dance, even if its record collection was limited. The Oxenford House Club's founder, Miss Lucy Maney, is now 98.
Ah, there we are. Oxenford House in St Lawrence.
My dad bought it, you see.
Right. Did you have a ballroom?
Of course it. Well, where we were around the dances, I hadn't had a ballroom there.
Good question. Was it a good place to go to meet the opposite sex?
Well, of course it was. If they wanted to come, I didn't tell anyone what they must do, Maria.
No, I'm not accusing you of running anything, really.
You're very interested now, I can see.
I am. I like this idea. So the Germans allowed you to have the club, and they didn't interfere?
Not interfere at all. They only came down twice, I think.
And why did they come down?
They wanted to look round, of course. Why would they come down, you silly man?
It's difficult for people of my generation because we know that Britain won, whereas you didn't know the end of the story. And I'm just fascinated to find out that you always thought you'd win.
Of course I did. It never occurred to me that we wouldn't win.
I think I understand now why my mother didn't want to talk about it or go on about it. You know, I get the feeling they were scared of boring us. Oh, blimey, you know, we had it tough. It was awful in the war. We had clogs. Well, they did have clogs, actually. And it's quite interesting to hear about it. Whenever I'm confronted by people of that generation, I'm always impressed by what they did and hopeful that I would have behaved in the same way. But part of me worries that I wouldn't.
Ian's mother's reticence had been frustrating, but the early death of his father meant Ian knew even less about the Scottish side of his family, and nothing at all about his grandfather's First World War experiences with the Highland Light Infantry. Ian's grandfather, called, like his father, David Hislop, died shortly before Ian was born. David Hislop came from Ayr, on the coast southwest of Glasgow, but apart from his stint at the front, he stayed all his life, working as a teacher and latterly headmaster.
Well, that's quite bizarre. James Hislop. I wonder if he's a relative. I remember coming back here once and we walked along the seafront and then went to see the house where my grandfather lived, which seems a pretty good place to start.
The two David Hislops, father and son, lived at 39 Blackburn Drive. Ian's grandmother had died when Ian's father was just 7.
It was tough,
yeah.
The boy being reared just alone with his dad.
Yeah.
But he was a very nice boy, whoever raised him. I think they've probably...
Betty Bird knows the house well. Her father was Ian's grandfather's best friend and a fellow teacher.
Everything does.
And I had no idea that you were David's son.
Really?
None.
What about my granddad? I look like him?
Yes, he was quite round in the face.
Oh, thank you, that's what we're going for. A round-faced look.
He was quite round. And he had a cheerful face. Yes, I twinkle.
Yeah, was he a cheerful soul?
I think so. I mean, I couldn't say what he was like at home. 4 walls, you know.
Yeah, oh yeah.
But we didn't talk about family things. It wasn't, you know, Oprah Winfrey thing in these days. Private family matters were kept private.
Yeah.
You know, the world has changed so much. I don't think you could live in this world. I find it difficult sometimes.
So you think it would be too complicated now?
It would be too much for them. They couldn't stand it. What they could stand least of all are the kind of jokes you hear on television. Sometimes I thought, when I watched you, I don't know whether I'm right or not, I sometimes sense a little sort of Presbyterian disapproval. And now that I know you're Davidson, I'm more sure than
you think it's in those
I think there's a little bit of ghost hanging around there that thinks, no, this is a bit too much. Is that right?
Sounds fairly accurate to me.
In common with so many Scots of that era, Ian's grandfather's Presbyterian faith was the most vital influence on his life. At Newton-on-Ayr Church, he taught at Sunday school, marched in the ranks, and served as an officer in its boys' brigade. Ian has asked an expert in Scottish religion, Professor Callum Brown, to help him make sense of his grandfather's religious writings.
Hello. Nice to meet you, Ian. Very nice to meet you.
I don't have much left from my grandfather, there's very little, but somehow these three rather moth-eaten sermons survived in a trunk. I presume these are sermons or talks that he gave.
They read to me like addresses to organisations of young people. This is a man who's experienced war. He's been tested.
The first talk is about the Confessions of St. Augustine. He's talking about Carthage, where the young Augustine went, and he describes it as the capital city of North Africa, which led the way in the new cult of licentiousness. The city was given up to pleasure-seeking and wickedness, and immorality stalked about naked and unashamed. At first the pleasures of the city made little appeal, but as he became more used to his surroundings, he began to find himself drawn more and more into the whirlpool of vice.
To me, there are two key sentences. One is, all our training, all our education is an assertion of something and a repression of something else. And your grandfather went on to be a teacher and a headmaster, and that's a very interesting philosophy of what education and purpose is about.
There's an image of him. He wished he had an X-ray of his soul, so he could see how he was doing, which bits of it were sort of muscular and which bits had sort of got flabby. But they hadn't got the technology yet for that.
You see aspects of him in you? Is there a bit of Hislop DNA transmitting itself?
I suppose when I look at him and I read what he'd done, and beyond the sort of the fact that distant lends it a sort of comic value, which it does, but beyond that, I can feel myself sympathising with what he's aiming to do. So I think there is something running through.
In the early 20th century, the most popular and public act of self-repression was to join the temperance movement. Ian's grandfather is thought to have been teetotal. His fellow churchgoer and fond pupil, 90-year-old Peggy McCrindle, still is.
Gosh, they're quite strong, aren't they, these adverts?
Yes, yes they are.
Not me.
No.
And it's a bulldog.
Yes.
That's very good propaganda.
Right.
Oh, and there's one with a Union Jack on it. L is for liquor, our nation's disgrace. If all would avoid it, 'twould safeguard the race.
Right. Yes, exactly. Yes.
So you must have taken this pledge.
I did.
So you kept that promise from age 7 till now.
I did, yes.
That's a pretty good promise.
It is a good one, a long one.
4 days is my record. January the 1st to the 5th.